This is the Tri-City Herald Edit Board for the Congressional District 4 race, and we have Representative Dan Newhouse and challenger Doug McKinley. And I will go ahead and introduce our board, and then we'll give you 2 minutes for an opening remark. We'll pepper you with questions. We'll give you 2 minutes for a closing remark. And I think when we do the opening, I'll let the incumbent go first. That's usually our policy. So again, I'm Cecilia Rexis. I'm the editorial writer. Joining us today, we have Matt Taylor. He's a retired editorial writer for the Tri-City Herald. We have Lori Williams. She's the current executive editor of the Tri-City Herald. We have Jack Briggs. He's a retired publisher for the Herald. Ken Robertson is the retired executive editor for the Herald. So lots of journalists. And then we do have a community member, Lori Lancaster. And she'd been on the board for at least a decade. And so we brought her back for the election. So that's us. Everything's on the record. I don't know if I'm missing anything. I think that's it. So we'll just go. So Dan, I'm gonna try to keep it to around 2 minutes, I guess, and I will time you whenever you want to get going. I'll just start it. So,
well, thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity to come before the Tri-City Herald Editorial Board and the members of the community and talk to you about this 2020 election. I'm humbly coming before the voters of the 4th District to ask them to support me, vote for me, to send me back to Washington, D.C. to be the representative in Congress. It's been a tremendous experience, one that I take very, very seriously, and looking forward to continuing representing the great people of Central Washington. You know, this is a very important election. It's probably, you hear that every single cycle, but truly, I think many of the decisions that we're going to be making in the next election and subsequent decisions from the people who are elected really will help determine our nation's future. And I think as a lifelong resident of Central Washington, born and raised right here, I've farmed my whole adult life. I raised my family here, went to school here. I think that because of my experiences, my life experiences, my elected experiences, being a state representative, as well as the director of agriculture, that I can truly say that the issues, the challenges that people face in Central Washington, I know because frankly, they're my issues too. I live them every single day. And I think that I'm well equipped to deal with those, search for the questions that are the answers to the questions that we have, and continue to be a strong voice for the people of the 4th District in Washington, D.C. So I'm humbly asking for people's support again. Look forward to continue serving the good people of this area. I've got a lot of priorities. Certainly, you know some of them, Hanford and immigration reform, many of the things that are so important to the people of Central Washington, and being only one of the handful of farmers in the current U.S. Congress. I think it's really important that we have people that understand the agricultural industry, and that has certainly been helpful for me as I represent Central Washington. So again, thank you very much for this opportunity, and I look forward to the next few minutes.
Great. Okay, Doug, your turn whenever you're ready.
Well, I'm running. My name is Doug McKinley, and thank you to the Tri-City Editorial Board for setting this up and giving us a chance to talk. I'm running for Congress because I think there's a deep problem in our country that has been going on for about the last 40 years, where increases in productivity across the board are not being shared with working men and women. And you see this is true in the agricultural economy, where we have the highest levels of poverty in the state, where we have the lowest family income in the 4th Congressional District. And you even see it in what we consider good paying, high wage jobs at Hanford. Anybody who's been here for any period of time knows that the jobs at Hanford used to pay much better and have much better benefits back in the 60s than they do now. And we've seen that really across the board. We've seen that in the private sector and we've seen it in the public sector. What we've seen is for the last 40 years that even though the country has had ever increasing productivity growth, the spoils of that productivity growth have not been shared with the American worker, have not been shared with ordinary people. Instead, all of that money has been funneled into the hands of a very small group of millionaires and billionaires. And you know, we need to make a decision as a country as to whether or not we're going to keep going down that road, or we're going to have some fundamental structural changes to make sure that we have a thriving, vibrant middle class and that the prosperity of the United States of America is broadly shared with the workers in the United States of America. And so, you know, I want that to happen, and that's why I'm running for Congress. I think it will enhance not only our economic security, but it will also enhance our national security. And, you know, we sadly, you know, I looked out there for politicians who were concerned about raising living standards, and I didn't see enough. I didn't see enough who were, and so I tossed my hat in the ring and ran for Congress.
Great. Thank you, Doug, very, very much. Wow, this is going to be a good conversation. I guess I would just like to ask Representative Newhouse what his thoughts are on Doug's position here on raising, you know, making a better life for everyone in the 4th District and the country. Do you have any thoughts on what he said, Dan?
Well, not to try to be humorous, but I think he didn't look far enough and just had to look up the road to where I live. And I think that I've been a tremendous advocate for all the people in the 4th District. You know, we have an agriculturally based economy throughout Central Washington. And I have been a champion for improving the business climate, helping to open and expand markets for agricultural products that we produce in this country and certainly in our state. I've been very active in trying to bring positive reforms to the agricultural labor force in our whole nation. Worked very hard to improve the standard of living. You know, some people will disagree with this, but we passed some very significant tax reform about 3 years ago that benefit all people. And you can see some of the results of that in the pre-COVID economy that we were experiencing. Record low unemployment figures for many of some of the very people that my opponent is talking about, for women, for minorities. Our economy was on fire. And so I think that, you know, I think the very opposite is could be argued, and I think is true, that we are doing many good things to improve everyone's lot in life. You know, when we improve the business climate, when we improve the employees' opportunities, you know, you raise everyone's vote at the same time. And so I think that, you know, is there more work to be done? Absolutely. But to help working men and women in this country provide educational opportunities, to provide opportunities for small businesses so people can live the American dream, I think that's something that has been a priority of mine and will continue to be.
Okay, Doug, I saw you chuckling a little bit. I'm just going to give you a chance to quickly comment if you want to.
Well, I think Congressman Newhouse is, how do you explain the tax vote? It gave trillions of dollars to billionaires and it ballooned the national debt. It gave basically no relief whatsoever to any of the agricultural workers in his district. He fails to recognize at all the high levels of poverty that exist up and down the district, and that existed even when we were essentially at very high levels of unemployment. If you get down to 3.5% unemployment, which we did, and you still don't see any wage growth, which the only wage growth we really saw in Washington was driven by the increases in the minimum wage, then there's got to be another mechanism at work. And there is. And what that is this huge consolidation of industry that's destroyed all the bargaining power for all the workers. And it just amuses me that Congressman doesn't recognize that as a problem. And I suppose I shouldn't expect him to. I mean, he's one of the people who's benefited from it. He's one of the people who makes millions of dollars from a low wage workforce.
Congressman, do you want to respond to that? I feel like we're going back and forth on some pretty good topics here.
Well, that's making some pretty strong accusations that I'm essentially benefiting off the low wages of my workers. If you talk to anybody in the business world today, wages have grown. I know on my own farm that if I can use my own experience, they're a huge percentage of our expenses every year. We raise some pretty labor-intensive crops, and many of my employees are making darn good wages, and not minimum wage, much higher than that. And so, in the real world, people are doing better. And of course, we have to talk about pre-COVID existence, because things have certainly been turned upside down in the last 6 or 7 months. But I think overall, the state, looking at, Doug brought up the unemployment figures, things have been improving greatly. The standard of livings have been improving. And I think, like I said, there's more to be done, but I think we're on a real good track of improving the economic well-being for Americans in this country.
I'm going to open it up and see if there's any board members who have questions
I'd
right now.
like to follow up on that, Dan. Doug has made the allegation that someone owning a multi-million-dollar farm operation and serving on ag committees in Congress constitutes a major conflict of interest. Do you feel that way?
So, Mr. Briggs, I would think that the opposite is true on that. By having real world experience of being an active farmer myself, in fact, many of my colleagues who do not have agricultural backgrounds come to me to ask for advice on and perspective on issues that they have to make decisions on. I think it gives me a tremendous step up in being able to represent my constituents. We certainly have a lot of farmers in this district, but we have a lot more people who are dependent on the agricultural industry in one way or another, whether farm workers, equipment dealers, suppliers, all kinds of trucking companies, all kinds of different businesses that depend on agriculture. And I make no apologies for being active in the agricultural industry and being able to relate and understand the issues that the agricultural industry face. I think it's an asset, and I think it's being one of, like I said, I think there's only about maybe 15 or 16 active farmers and ranchers out of 535 people. I think it's truly something that benefits Central Washington to have my experience and perspective. So that's my opinion.
Could we let Doug flesh out his allegation?
Sure.
Certainly. Well, I don't think anybody would argue that Congressman Newhouse doesn't have some expertise in agricultural economics. He certainly spent his whole lifetime working in the field. But it's just because you're an expert doesn't mean you don't have a conflict of interest. Congress passed numerous bills over the last several years where billions of dollars was paid out to farmers. First, it was paid out because the farmers had lost their markets in retaliation for President Trump's tariffs on Chinese goods. And then they later paid out billions of dollars in agricultural payments to people who had lost their markets because of the COVID crisis. How that money was distributed, how much of it was paid to large agricultural concerns versus poor, undocumented, or Daca or first generation field workers, that's a decision that Congress makes. And that's a decision that directly impacts money going in and coming out of Dan Newhouse's company. And I would venture to guess that he makes a great deal more money being a farmer than he does being a congressman. My suspicion is that it's much more lucrative to run his farm than it is to represent the 4th District. So I think it's obvious there's a conflict of interest. I'm kind of shocked that he would deny it. What I would expect him to argue is that he manages the conflict of interest, or somehow that he puts the interests of the employees ahead of the interests of the multi-million-dollar corporations. But we've seen no evidence of that. You know, we've seen no flow down of all those dollars of federal aid that flowed to the agricultural sector for crops that weren't grown or crops that weren't sold, that flowed to the workers who were laid off because those crops weren't grown and sold.
Anyone else?
I'd just like to hear. Dan, did you get any of that money?
Congressman, did you
Excuse
see?
me?
Yeah,
So
Jack is.
Did you get any of that farm money that flowed from the?
So the Paycheck Protection Program, just like many businesses throughout the country, we applied for and got some of that in order to keep our employees employed, to keep our farm operational. So yes, but again, I think that gives me a better perspective of what the needs truly are in the country. You know, we're trying to make ends meet just like every other business is. We're trying to keep people employed. I want to be able to have my employees paid on a timely basis. And that money was made available to businesses throughout the country to help them to provide essentially a bridge over this pandemic, to bring them out to the other side so that they can continue to be successful, so that they continue to produce and to continue to employ people. So I think it gives me that unique perspective of why it's important. And I make no apologies for being in business and creating jobs and trying to contribute to the economy and representing those people that are doing all of those things while I'm in Congress. I think that's a very valuable perspective to bring to the table.
So I'd like to ask a somewhat related question, Congressman and Mr. McKinley. You both talked about the people who do the work on our farms and in our packing plants and so on. And I remember that I believe it was 2 years ago, Congressman, you mentioned that you thought it was valuable to have your experience, whether we had a Democratic House or a Republican House, because you were able to work across the aisle. But in the last 4 years, the Republicans had 2 years in charge. They didn't get anything done to really do immigration reform. I mean, you could correct me if I'm wrong, but I have yet to see anything really substantive. As a matter of fact, so far as I can see, you got nothing done for the Daca recipients. If anything, the Trump administration has made their lives far less certain. And, you know, I suspect at least hundreds, likely thousands of the people whom you represent, if they're not Daca if they're not Daca members, someone in their family is. Maybe several of the people in their family. And your argument was because you're somewhat centrist, you can work across both sides. Why are we getting nothing done? And why can't we fix these knotty problems? I mean, I don't have a Democrat I can ask. You're the guy who, it's on your doorstep. You've been there for what, 4 years now?
Three.
You're hoping for 4.
But
Okay.
yes. So fair question, absolutely. And but can I take exception to your what you're saying? I think we have made progress. I think we've made tremendous progress in a very bipartisan way. You're right. In the first, I'm not sure when you're quoting me, whether it was 2 years ago or 4 years ago.
I'm not
But,
even,
2 years ago, the Republicans went from, okay, but we went from majority to minority. So the Democrats are in control now. We worked hard those first 2 years and came close, but we just couldn't get anything over the finish line that was acceptable to both sides. So we kept working. And I'm very happy to say that in this last term, to culminate about almost a year's work, starting early January of the 116th Congress, we passed last December comprehensive agricultural labor reform for the first time in almost 35 years on a bipartisan basis, passed that off the floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. And I'm very proud of that. I think it was a tremendous step forward. I'm an eternal optimist. I know realistically, we're almost at the end of the term now, and with the election and things coming up, likely it won't get done in the Senate. But we passed it in the House, sent it to the Senate, and unfortunately, shortly after that, the COVID pandemic broke out, and well, you know the story from there. So I'm thinking that it may be another one of those victims of the COVID-19. But I think we've made progress. We're already, Democrats and Republicans, our group that has been working together over this past 2 years, have already gotten together to strategize how we bring this up immediately in a new Congress so that we can get this across the finish line in both chambers and onto the president's desk. It's more urgent now than it was 2 years ago. And then as far as the Daca issue is concerned, I've met with hundreds of my constituents, these young people who qualify under the Daca program. I know many of their personal stories and know that they're contributing members of our communities and have worked very hard to get a solution passed through Congress and have voted for several. One of the few Republicans, if I can say, that has. But we have not been able to get that through the Senate either. And so it's frustrating. I share your frustrations, but I don't think there's no more excuses left for Congress not to act on reforms for the Daca individuals. We've got to do that. And you made a statement that President Trump is making it harder on them. In some ways, that's the effect of some of his decisions. But I guess being a glass half full person, I look at it this way. President Trump has said, Congress, you need to fix this. By executive order, I can only make temporary fixes. You need to give a permanent solution to this issue. And he put it on our shoulders. And shame on Congress for not getting it done.
so is Senator McConnell willing to even take up that bill? Because as to my understanding, there are scores of House passed bills that McConnell, they hit the Senate and they just go into the dustbin of history. And some of those perhaps are partisan. Some of them seem to be victim of it's not totally a Republican initiative, so we're not going to pass it. Is that fair?
That's certainly a fair characterization of some of the bills that are in front of the Senate. Things are very political over there right now, as you know. There's a lack of wanting to work together, but in a bipartisan way and on many things. And I think that both of these issues, the immigration issues and any aspect of those are some of the most hot political issues that we deal with, unfortunately. And the people that pay the price for that are those that are living in our communities right now. I think I think there is a group of senators that we can work with that understand the urgency of these issues. And like I said, we were building momentum of moving from passing the bill in the House into the Senate, and then circumstances that were out of our control kind of sidetracked our efforts there, and people wanted to talk about other things, and so we've kind of lost that momentum. But there's a huge commitment on my part and many others to continue this fight and this struggle, and I'm hopeful, truly am, that we can get this done in this next Congress. We have to.
Mr. McKinley, would you like to respond to that?
I certainly would. I find that perhaps the most disingenuous answer I could have imagined. In the first instance, there were several opportunities that Congressman Newhouse had to move the bill along that he didn't take. For example, he didn't sign the discharge petition until the Democrats moved it to the floor. But more importantly, he's mischaracterizing the power of the White House. When the Supreme Court ruled this term on the Daca bill, what they held was that Donald Trump had the power to get rid of Daca root and branch, but that he couldn't do it because he had failed to follow the correct procedures. The administration immediately said, well, we're going to go right back to it, and this time we're going to follow the correct procedures. So the only thing that's standing between the complete elimination of Daca and the complete elimination of Daca is the election. Quite simply, if President Trump does what he's promised to do and what he litigated all the way to the Supreme Court trying to do, is if he is reelected, he's going to eliminate Daca, and there's nothing the House or the Senate can do to stop him. Now, let's suppose that we could get a bill through Mitch McConnell. Do you think Donald Trump is going to sign it after litigating the issue all the way to the Supreme Court, trying to eliminate the program? To me, that seems like wishful thinking in the extreme. I also know a number of these DACA kids. They're my clients and they're my students. And what's going on is a tragedy. And I'll give Dan credit for talking the good talk, but the reality is the bill that made it through the House made it through because of the Democratic Party. The reason it's not making it through the Senate is because of the Republican Party. And the reason it would not be signed if it made it to the president's desk is because Donald Trump has no intention whatsoever of making DACA permanent. And the administration has been open and completely transparent about those intentions. To pretend that they're going to completely reverse course, I think, what's the evidence for that? But why would you even suggest that?
Can we try another subject?
Yes, I think we've exhausted that.
It seems like healthcare is going to be a major concern coming up. Both of you, should profit be part of the healthcare system? Doug, how about you first once?
Well, you have to define profit. I'm an attorney in private practice. I charge for money for my services. Is that considered profit? If it is, then certainly profit should be part of our healthcare system. Nurses and doctors should be paid for it. I don't really think that the profits are the problem. I think the problem is that we have a very inefficient and overly expensive healthcare system. We spend far more money than any country in the world, any industrialized country in the world, and get far worse outputs. Now, the Affordable Care Act is the beginning of a system that could change that. If you look at any other Western industrialized nation and how they've organized their healthcare system, the Affordable Care Act moves us toward that in state. And certainly everything that the Democrats have put on the table and everything that Vice President Biden has put on the table would move us in that direction. The question then is, what's the alternative? Congressman Newhouse voted every single time he had the opportunity to eliminate the Affordable Care Act. he cannot point to any plan that would replace it. So what you're talking about, again, 20 million Americans, I think 80,000 in our district losing their healthcare coverage with no plan to replace it. I think that's a much bigger issue than sort of defining what is and is not profit in the healthcare system.
Dan? Dan, do you have a response?
Can I ask, can you hear
Yes.
me? 'Cause
Yes.
I heard maybe 10% of what Doug just said. It's
Oh,
so can you hear me though?
yes,
Clearly.
yes.
Okay. I apologize for that. That's again, part of the downfall of living in a rural area, I guess. But Mr. Briggs, I think you asked if should there be profit in the healthcare industry? Is that
Yes.
the question?
Yes.
And I did hear that part of Doug's answer, and I would say I'd have to agree that that there has to be from hospitals and the clinics, the doctors, the nurses, all the providers. There has to be some obviously remuneration for their services that they provide. Even the much maligned drug companies, they have to be able to make a profit in order to continue doing the research and providing the essential drugs that we need. The level of those profits in the drug companies, that's probably another question we could argue. But I think it's just like any other services that is provided, there should be a profit basis, and it seems that makes the most sense. But what we don't have is transparency in that. You and I, as consumers of healthcare products, we really don't have a good basis to be able to compare services or options that are available to us. And so I think that's something that we need to look at as far as improving, make us more bona fide consumers of healthcare, if you can put it in that vernacular. So, and then, and I apologize, I really couldn't hear a lot of Doug's response beyond that. So I don't know if there's other things that should be addressed or not. But you bring up the issue of healthcare. I think it's certainly one of the most important, particularly in a situation we live in today with the coronavirus and everybody becoming much more aware of some of the necessary protocols that we should follow to keep each other safe. So obviously healthcare is on everybody's mind in one way or another. And I just got to say, there's been a lot of criticism of Republicans for not being able to come up with an alternative to the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. And some of that is, I suppose, justified. It's a difficult, complex subject, but I would say that Obamacare isn't the total answer either. So if there's going to be criticism, I think it should be on both sides of the equation. Certainly I listen to my constituents. I truly do. And many people tell me that they do not like some of the things that they're being required to do under Obamacare. So having options is important. Having alternatives, having choice is important. And certainly we haven't seen insurance premiums go down. In fact, they've been going up in many of the plans that we have. So I think, we got to make sure everybody's covered. We've got to make sure that those ever-present pre-existing conditions are part of the solution. They have to be. We've got to make sure that people have access to healthcare and have choice. And I think part of the profit question, maybe, Mr. Briggs, is that there needs to be competition. So I think it goes back to that transparency, so that we can help drive down some of those costs. But I think expanding pools for businesses to be able to offer health coverage to their employees. I think expanding the competition between insurance providers throughout the country instead of just throughout one single market in a particular state Some of the things that we've talked about, health savings accounts, making those more readily and easily available to individuals. And I also think that giving individuals some of the same tax benefits that companies get as it comes to healthcare costs. And then just specifically, a couple things that I've been engaged in recently. You all know what we're doing right now, this virtual kind of meetings. I've been supportive and introduced legislation to actually help make telemedicine more easily accessible, more readily available, and covered by Medicare more easily. And so I think those kinds of things are, as we learn from this pandemic, some of the new ways that we can provide necessary healthcare to people, we should take those lessons very seriously as we move forward. And again, I apologize for if there are other things I should have addressed, but like I said, I didn't get the gist of Mr. McKinley's answer.
Doug, is that enough?
Well, I wish he had heard my answer, because, and I credit you, Dan, for confessing that the Republicans should take some of the blame for this. But you can't simultaneously say that you're for protecting pre-existing conditions when your entire party voted again and again and again to eliminate those pre-existing conditions. And there's an active lawsuit that's going to be heard by the Supreme Court on November 10th, where the state attorney general, or Republican state attorney generals, are going to ask the Supreme Court to declare the entire bill unconstitutional and completely eliminate any protection for pre-existing conditions. You know, if you really believed in pre-existing conditions, maybe you should offer up a bill that protects them instead of eliminating, both through litigation and legislation, the only bill that does so currently.
Well, actually, I've been a part of that effort, Doug. So thank you for bringing that up. You know, we have put legislation together to exactly do that, to accomplish the protection of people that do have pre-existing conditions. So that's, you know, unfortunately, I think you're reading from old talking points when you talk about Republicans being against covering people in that situation. That's simply not my position. That's not where I stand. And so I'll continue to support legislation that protects people that have those pre-existing conditions, and as I have in the past.
Is there a bill number, Dan, that we could refer to?
I'll get that for you, Doug. Absolutely.
Okay.
There's several proposals out there. There's lots of different things that are moving, a lot of different options that people are considering. So, but I think on both sides of the aisle, Democrats and Republicans recognize, and even the president has said, and you brought his name up several times, that that's a priority of his. So I think we can probably, as a country debates healthcare, recognize that we've all come to the conclusion that that's an important tenet of any solution as we move forward.
Well, I agree, but you know, let's be honest about what the facts are. The fact is, there's a law, the Affordable Care Act, which says insurers can't discriminate against people for pre-existing conditions. The fact is, there is no bill that I'm aware of, and if you can provide me a number, I'd be interested to hear it, but there's no bill that I'm aware of that would do the same thing, that would repeat that. And in fact, there's no need for one, because the Affordable Care Act already covers that aspect. The fact is, the Republican House members voted time and time again, yourself included, to repeal that law, the Affordable Care Act, which would repeal those protections. And the fact is that the Trump administration, combined with the Attorney General of multiple states, Republican attorneys generals, have been suing to declare the Affordable Care Act unconstitutional. And the fact is, the last fact is, they're going to get a hearing on that in front of the Supreme Court on November 10th. about a week after our election. And if the Supreme Court rules that the Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional, then the only protections that exist in the law presently for pre-existing conditions are going to be out of the law, and there is no replacement that has been passed by Congress. Those are the facts.
Yes, and I'm saying that the intention of Republicans and Democrats is to be certain that the solutions coming forward, and if there is a decision coming out of the Supreme Court, react to that with solutions that include covering people with pre-existing conditions. So.
Any
I'd
other?
like to,
Go for
I
it,
would
Matt.
like to ask about the big presence in your campaign of Donald Trump. And I'm pretty sure he's a pretty big motivator of your campaign, Doug. How is Donald Trump affecting what you do or causing what you do? And I feel like the congressman has played done some strong things for our community. I just wonder, but he seldom mentions Donald Trump. Although you say mentioned him in your Doug, you mentioned him in your in the brochure here, not the brochure, the pamphlet, the political pamphlet. I just want to know. That's the biggest subject there is in the country after coronavirus. But what are the farmers? What are your backers? Doug, I'm sorry, I'm looking at my screen and I realize it may not track with yours. But I'm wondering, what do you hear from farmers about him? And I know you're not running for president. I just am curious.
You want Dan to go first, Matt?
Sure.
Okay, we'll let Dan go first on that.
So again, I couldn't hear the full question. I apologize, Matt. And no, it's not your fault. So is there somebody else that maybe?
He wants to know how big a
Cynthia,
role.
is that-
Cecilia Brexis. Matt was asking how big a role Donald Trump is playing in your campaign. Like what, did I say that right, Matt? Is that what you're asking?
Well, it's actually, I want to know what the opinions of the voters, the farmers that he's talking with. What is he hearing from them?
Oh.
Are they all just really tickled to death with having Donald Trump up there? I don't think he'd be in the race if I'm pointing at Doug. I doubt he would be. I don't know anything. I would doubt that he would be in this race if Donald Trump weren't in the White House. That is no way disparaging of you.
So I think if I understand the question, what are
keep going, sir?
Okay. So what do my constituents, particularly farmers, tell me what they think about Donald Trump? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I think if I could generalize, I don't think there's an individual in the country that doesn't have an opinion about Donald Trump, one way or the other. Not too many neutral opinions about the president. And whether people like him personally or how he communicates is one thing. But most people tell me, in spite of that, and some people love the way he communicates actually, but most people tell me that they feel that they finally have someone in the White House that listens to them and that's working hard on their behalf, that understands them. For instance, we talked a little bit about trade. A lot of the agricultural products we produce go overseas, and we've had negotiations ongoing with different countries trying to improve our trading relationships, and causing a lot of anxiety and angst by some of the disruptions in our markets, right? And even so, and I can't say this is 100%, but a lot of producers have been telling me that they are glad that there's finally someone in the White House that has the guts to stand up to countries like China, who have essentially been eating our lunch for a long time, and to try to do what we can to level that playing field so that we can compete on an equal basis. And so, and plus pre-COVID, as we were talking about before, many people have seen the economy and the improvements that we were experiencing, and are very thankful for that. And so I think overall, you know, like I said, we have a strong conservative district in Central Washington. Mr. Trump, if you just drive around the countryside, you see a lot of support for our president, and I think that most people will tell you that they want to see him reelected. And Matt, I hope that covers most of the points you were talking about.
Sure, I think it does.
I brought up the issue of trade, and China is the hard one. We've got the USMCA, we got that passed, and that's great. I'm very much in favor of that, and I think we're going to see great things. We've made huge progress with China, and Japan and Korea, and we're working with the EU and the UK. China's the tougher one, but I just spent some time with our a trade representative for agriculture just yesterday, and he was giving me some great information about the phase 1 deal with China and the tremendous amount of agricultural products that are on the books to be purchased by China this year and going into next year. And so I think, it's a tough relationship. It's difficult negotiating with the Chinese, but they are following through on many of their commitments. And I think that's good. We've got to keep their feet to the fire. We've got to keep working hard, but that's key for the continued success of our agricultural industry. And people recognize that. People are seeing the impacts of that. And so, like I said, they're bullish on helping to level that playing field. And Mr. Trump has done a lot in that regard.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Doug.
Well, I'm not sure what the congressman's talking about. There is no deal with China. There is no deal to hold their feet to the fire. There are no agricultural exports taking place under any such deal. Donald Trump has made a complete hash of our
That's not true.
of our trading relationship with China. I agree we need to be tougher on China, but China was very strategic. When Donald Trump put blanket tariffs on all Chinese goods, the leadership in China knew where to hit back, where it would hurt, and they targeted our agricultural sector. They didn't target our high-tech sector. They want those chips. They want to keep those electronics factories humming. So they went after the specialty crops. They went after wheat, soybean, et cetera. And those agreements have not been completely finalized and formulated. But the question Matt asked wasn't about trade, and it wasn't about China. It was about Donald Trump. And I can appreciate Dan's conundrum here. I give Dan credit. I think he's a decent man. I don't think that he approves of everything that Donald Trump says and does. I don't think a decent person can approve of everything that Donald Trump says and does. But I think the congressman is trapped because he has a base of voters who he has to appeal to if he wants to keep his job. And that base of voters will not put up with any criticism whatsoever of Donald Trump. So Congressman Newhouse is unable to say, I don't approve of Donald Trump telling people not to wear masks, or I don't approve of Donald Trump separating little kids from their families at the border. There's a whole list of atrocities that the Trump administration has committed, and I don't think Dan can survive politically and put a whole lot of distance between himself and Donald Trump. And as a result of that, I think this election has become sort of a proxy. If you're happy with Donald Trump, if you want to see Donald Trump stay in the White House, if you want to see our government managed in the manner it has been for the last 4 years, then you should return Donald Trump and Dan Newhouse to Washington, D.C. If you're unhappy with Donald Trump and you're unhappy with congressional leadership that doesn't stand up to him and hold him accountable, then, you probably shouldn't vote for me. You should probably vote for Dan Newhouse. And, we'll see where the chips fall in the 4th Congressional District. I'm hopeful that enough people will share my view that Donald Trump's presidency has been very destructive, and the Republicans in Congress and in the Senate have not done a good enough job of holding him to account, that they'll vote for a change. And we'll see where the chips fall.
But Doug, you've got a long way to go. Dan's got 57% of the vote in the primary. You get 26%. It's almost like you're the latest in a string of Democratic sacrificial lambs in this race. Why is that? Why is it that Democrats don't do well in a district which at one time was represented strongly by Democrats? What's happening?
Well, Jack, I've asked myself that question a lot. I arrived here in my family moved to Tri-Cities, my wife and I, in 1991. And at the time, Lane Bray was our state representative. Kurt Ludwig was, I think, our state senator. About half of the county offices were held by Democrats. In the 92 election, we elected Jay Inslee to be our 4th congressional representative. And then what happened in 94 was Newt Gingrich came out with highly inflammatory, highly derogatory language, and he directed that at Democrats, and it was very effective. And they were able to swing the House of Representatives for the first time in the direction of the Republicans. And since then, no Democrat has been elected to Congress in this district. It hasn't happened, and you're quite correct. Now, I'm encouraged, however, because every year the demographics of our district change. Every year they shift just a little bit, and there are plenty of voters to put a Democrat in office if they vote. Dan's electoral prospects and my electoral prospects are 100% dependent upon about 50,000 18 to 40-year-olds who historically have been very infrequent voters. But their interests are very aligned with my agenda. Their interests are very aligned with having affordable healthcare that's not dependent on a job. Their interests are very well aligned with having a congressman who fights to make sure that their wages rise. Their interests are very much aligned with having the federal government help bring down housing costs by building more low-cost housing. Their interests are very well aligned with having the cost of education come down. So all of the things that the Republican Party has traditionally fought against, and I am advocating for and putting my campaign, centering my campaign around, these are all things that I believe speak to that forgotten voter who has sort of opted out of the process, because they've come to the conclusion, and I think it's reasonable for them to come to the conclusion, that politics doesn't affect their lives, and no matter how they vote, things don't get better for them. Because over the last 40 years, that's pretty much what's happened. No matter how hard they work, no matter what happens, the rich get richer and the poor struggle and barely get by. And if they have, a health bill they can't pay, or their transmission breaks down, or they lose a job, then they're really in a world of hurt. And the coronavirus has exposed that in a way that nothing else could have. You're seeing massive amounts of people lining up at food banks who aren't able to pay their bills, and now they're, the federal help that they were getting before is set to expire. Every credible news source that I'm reading is saying that we're going to see a huge flow of evictions on the near horizon. And, it's time that we put the investment back in our people. It's time that we rebuilt the middle class. And hopefully that message will resonate and get those people who have soured on the political process, who become cynical about partisan politics. Hopefully I can be their champion, and I can, and they'll trust me to actually try and do the things that I want to do to rebuild that middle class, themselves included. And if that happens, maybe we can get enough votes that we can flip a district, and then you'll have a congressman who, his full-time job is and his full-time advocacy is towards rebuilding that, that worker who's making right about the median family wage in the 4th Congressional District, which is about $38,000 a year. If we can take that median worker from 38,000 to say 58,000, all kinds of good things start to happen. Because, earlier in the conversation, Dan referred to himself as a job creator. Well, I hate to break it to you, Congressman, but you're not a job creator. The people who create jobs are consumers. If nobody's buying your barley or your hops, it doesn't matter how many people you hire. It doesn't matter how many acres you grow. If you can't sell it, if there's no consumers for it, then you're not going to farm. So ultimately, what decides how big the economy is and how fast it grows is how thirsty the consumers are. If we're able to transfer large amounts of the wealth that the country generates from rent extracting billionaires and put it in the hands of their workers, right? So that, let's just take Amazon, for example. We have a big Amazon facility here in Tri-City.
You give me a long answer to a short question.
I'm really passionate about this, Jack. I
Yes.
really am. I mean, when I grew up, it was common that a working guy could support his family. His wife didn't have to work. He could put his kids through college. He could enjoy vacation, and he could enjoy a nice retirement.
I don't know how you're going to get Dan to answer that.
I agree.
Yeah.
But I think we can get back to that. And I think every single person in Congress should be explaining how they plan to get us there.
Okay.
I think Dan,
I would just answer, if I could answer just a second. 2 things I'd like to say. I grew up in the South, and everybody didn't always ride around in nice cars and go on great vacations. Got a lot of Black people, not included, I don't think, in your synopsis there. And one other thing, I realize this is probably very dated, but I would just like to hear from both of you on tearing down 4 dams.
I think this should be the last question, unless, Dan, did you have anything you needed to say about what Doug was talking about? Was there any little quick thing you wanted to say? Or we can just move on to the dam question and then do our closing arguments.
I would just say that if, my opponent says it would be important for the 4th District to have essentially someone in their corner that's fighting for them to help improve their lives in so many different ways. And I would just say, make the statement that that's exactly what they have in me. The people of the 4th District of the state of Washington are my priority. And I'll continue, as I have over my last 3 terms, working as hard as I can on their behalf.
Okay.
And so that's my commitment, and I have a record to prove that, and I'll hold that up against anybody. So I'd love to go on and talk about the dams.
Okay. Yes, we are right at the top of the hour, so hopefully you can make that very quick. So Matt wanted to know about your position on the Snake River dams, both of you, and then we're going to do closing. So go for it, Mr. Newhouse. I think we know your position on the dams. You've been a champion for them, but go ahead and elaborate.
Well, you took the words right out of my mouth. I've been a champion for preserving, I think, what we could call a very valuable infrastructure that we have in the Columbia Snake River system that provides this, not just the Tri-Cities, not just Central Washington, but the state of Washington and the whole Pacific Northwest region with so many benefits in clean, renewable, carbon-free electricity, irrigation water that allows truly the prosperous agricultural industry to thrive in Central Washington, the transportation system that it provides us that actually makes Lewiston, Idaho a seaport, which is an amazing thing that provides the ability to transport goods, not just from our state, but from the entire region. And then all of the other benefits that we see from that grow from all of those different activities. You're absolutely right. I am a strong supporter, a champion of the Columbia Snake River dams. Do we have challenges? Yeah, absolutely. And we work as hard as we can to address salmon. We want to keep salmon, the iconic salmon of the Pacific Northwest. We invest a lot in new technologies, always looking for ways to improve passage through the dams, improve habitat, improve all of the things that will make it necessary for them to be able to survive. It's not just the state of Washington. We have to think of other states too. And they want to see their salmon back in strong numbers. And I think, my position is that dams and salmon, we have proved can and do coexist. And I think if we're smart, we can continue to make that a true statement. And for the future of our region, the Columbia Snake River system is just critical. And I will continue to be a strong champion for the dams.
Okay, all right, Doug, your turn.
As I pointed out in my written commentary, that you guys had asked us to provide written answers. This was one of the questions. I think the issue of the dams has essentially been decided by the latest EIS. I don't see any real possibility that the dams are going to be removed for the foreseeable future. But when the invitations to this went out, the editorial board said if we had time, we could ask one question. And so I do have one question for the congressman. And I would just like to know, Mr. Newhouse, are there any actions by Donald Trump that you would like to take this opportunity to repudiate, to distance yourself from? Is there anything that Donald Trump has done while he's been in office, or all of the things that he's done that you would say you disapproved of? Can you provide us that list?
So, Mr. McKinley, I think you're asking a question about the president, that whether or not I approve of some of the way he communicates, some of the things that he says. And, frankly, there are times when, yes, I wish he would use different language, or I wish he would maybe put away his phone and not tweet so often. And I absolutely, you mentioned holding him accountable, or even if you elect Donald Trump, you're electing me, where I'm a proxy for him. There's numerous times that I have taken exception with positions that the administration, the president has taken, and I will continue to stand up for those things that I think are important to Central Washington, to the state of Washington. If this president or any other takes a different position, I will argue on the behalf of the people that I represent. I can give you numerous examples of that.
Please do.
For instance,
that we're getting, this is
instance,
good.
Please do. That's what I want. I want the examples.
Okay.
Absolutely. My position on Yucca Mountain, the repository for nuclear waste, is opposite from the administration, right? You're probably familiar with that. Every budget cycle, the administration comes out with a lower funding level for Hanford than what's necessary. And so we have to fight every year to make sure we get the right amount of funding. And then just a small thing, but big to a lot of different people, the Job Corps. I had to take the administration to task to preserve the great benefits that we get out of the Job Corps. We've got two in our district right here, in White Swan and Moses Lake, and we see a tremendous amount of benefit for our communities from. So there's just a few examples of where I will stand up to this administration, and like I said, any administration, if they go contrary to what I think are the best wishes and the benefit of my constituents.
So when the invitations went out, we did say that if there was time, we would let the candidates ask each other a question. And since Doug asked you a question, Congressman, if you would like to ask him a question, I'll give you the time for that, to be fair. Do you have a question for him?
So I think Doug was very good about sidestepping the answer to his position on the dams. And his point being that that's already been decided, there's a record of decision. but I don't think that it's quite as cut and dry as that. All of us know that there are folks that would like to see the dams gone, and their intention is to continue this fight. If they can't win it in the administration level or the legislative level, they're going to go into the courts. And so I think it's still a valid question, one that needs answering, and one that people in Central Washington need to understand where we both, our positions are. So, Mr. McKinley, do you support breaching Columbia and Snake River dams?
You know, Dan, the arguments on both sides of the dam issue, I started looking into this about a year ago. And what I found is that the arguments on both sides of the dam issue are very disingenuous. And for example, there was a video that your office promoted that was put out by, I think, the Washington Policy Center. And, you know, one of the things that happens is when proponents of the dams make arguments about their benefits, they will switch from apples to oranges, going back and forth between talking about the benefits of the 4 lower Snake River dams to the benefits of the entire Columbia Snake River system, including, you know, all the main stem dams, Grand Coulee, Bonneville, McNary, you know, all up and down the Snake. And what that does is it really pollutes the discussion from being a fact-based and science-based discussion, because the benefits of the Grand Coulee Dam, for example, dwarf all of the benefits of the 4 lower Snake River dams, just in terms of the magnitude of power that's delivered by it, you know, the amount of storage, of energy storage. And so my position really is that, you know, it needs to be an honest debate. It needs to be a science-based debate. And we need to listen honestly to both sides of the debate and the different points that are being made. And I don't think we've had that. Personally, I do not believe that it's in our interest to allow salmon to go extinct. However, I'm also aware of what's going on the Fraser River in Canada, where there are no dams and there have been huge reductions in the number of coho. I've tried to get to the bottom of that. I've talked to fish and wildlife biologists, and to be honest with you, I haven't come up with a satisfactory answer. So, you know, to me, I lack the expertise. I'm glad I'm not the federal judge who is going to have to decide this matter if it, you know, remains in litigation, because I don't think either side is really being an honest broker as to what the actual facts are. And I also think that it's an incredibly complex question about whether or not, or what needs to happen to preserve those wild salmon runs. I do know that the Snake River runs really, really warm, and that's not good for fry. And I do know that if you allow the salmon free passage to the upper reaches of Idaho, you open up more habitat for wildlife restoration that has ever been tried in human history. I do know that the results from breaching the Elwha Dam on the west side of the mountains so far looks very promising. But can I say definitively yes or no, with or without the dams, we're going to save the salmon or not save the salmon? I can't. I lack the expertise. And so, you know, as I believe with all public policy, we need to be honest brokers. We need to follow the science, and we need to, you know, decide, you know, what do we value?
Okay,
do we
Doug.
value?
You're good. We got it. We got it. We really need to wrap this up because we actually have another one right after this. So, Doug, I'm going to let you have your closing arguments or closing position since Dan went first. And so whenever you want to sum up, go for it. But I am going to cut you off at 2 minutes.
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Again, I want to thank the editorial board for giving us an opportunity to talk. I think Jack's observation is correct, that it's an uphill battle for a Democrat to win in this district. But I think it's also an uphill battle for working men and women in this country, and it has been for a long time. The benefits of our economy, an uninterrupted 40-year productivity and growth rate in the gross national product has not been equally distributed. It's not been shared with the workers who've generated that efficiency and that productivity growth. And we see it manifests itself in so many ways. From families living from paycheck to paycheck, from financial stresses to $1.5 trillion of student loan debt hanging over the heads of our young people. And we need Congress to address those problems. I don't think that you can get to any issue until you get to the issue of rebuilding the middle class in this country. Until we start rebuilding the middle class in this country and making our prosperity broadly shared, I don't think Americans have time, and we're going to just maintain ourselves in a partisan gridlock where we're not going to be able to agree because we're not fighting or we're not working on the real issues that affect people's lives.
That's great. Thank you. All right, Congressman, whenever you're ready.
Sure. Well, thank you again to everybody on the editorial board. I appreciate the opportunity to meet with you again and talk about some of the important issues that we face, not only in Central Washington, but throughout the country. And just to reiterate that I truly think that the priorities of the people in Central Washington are the same ones that I hold. I represent my district well. I'm a product of the 4th Congressional District. And I'm very proud of the work that I've done, the work that I've been able to be a part of in a bipartisan way. And some of the things I mentioned, some I didn't. The missing and murdered Indigenous women crisis issue that we just in the last couple of weeks passed some bipartisan legislation to help address that, which is very important to Central Washington. The Hanford cleanup funding, which is always accomplished in a bipartisan basis and so important for our area. We started out the 116th Congress passing legislation that relates to the enhancement of the Yakima River Basin, which again, on a bipartisan basis, and I'm very proud of that. And then as we talked at length about the Farm Worker Modernization Act that I've dedicated a lot of time in my congressional career to, and is a huge priority of mine as we move into the next Congress. So overall, I think the 4th District deserves someone that understands the issues, that knows the challenges that we face, and who is dedicated to working across the aisle with anybody that wants to work for a solution to come up with those answers that to the challenges that we face. I'm that person, and I've been humbled to have that opportunity, and I look forward for the opportunity to continue representing the people, the great people of Central Washington in Washington, D.C. So thanks again for this opportunity. Appreciate it very much.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you both. This was wonderful. Thank you. We appreciate it.